Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of 5 Cheap Games, a series where I go over 5 cheap games for a particular console. Now in the past I've done the Nintendo Wii, I've done the PS2, and more recently I did the Xbox Series S and X. But I've never done a handheld before, so today I thought I would take the opportunity to tackle Nintendo's 16-bit beast, the Game Boy Advance. I don't actually know if it's 16-bit, but I'm guessing because it plays a lot of Super Nintendo games. This console is one of my favorite handhelds, and I think it'd be interesting to talk about 5 cheap games you can get. Maybe you're just getting into the Game Boy Advance scene. Maybe you've had one since childhood and you want to rediscover the console, find some new games to play. I have a good number of games for the console. And we're only going to be talking about GBA games today. Only Game Boy Advance games. No Game Boy Color today. Those will get their own individual episodes later on down the line. So yeah, let's hop in with some games for the GBA. Just a quick editor's note. I forgot to mention in my intro here that since the GBA is a more sought-after console by dumb millennials like me who want to re-experience their childhood, all the games here, usually I go for games that are under $20. Today I went for games that are under $30 because most GBA games run a little higher. So I used price charting for all the games today, and I made sure that you could purchase all of these games for under $30 each. So, yeah. Enjoy the episode. Yeah, GBA, yeah. First up, we have a classic game by Capcom. There are a lot of Mega Man games for the GBA. In fact, some of my favorite Mega Man games are for the GBA. The Battle Network series, I love them, and my all-time favorite Mega Man game is probably Mega Man Zero. But those games are pricier for the console. If you're a Mega Man fan and you want something cheaper, Mega Man and Base has you covered. Mega Man and Base was originally a game that came out on the Super Famicom in conjunction with Mega Man 8. Mega Man 8 was for PlayStation and Sega Saturn, so they made Mega Man and Base for the Super Nintendo in Japan. We didn't get that version over here. You can find pirated, versions, like fan-made copies now for the Super Nintendo if you want to play it that way. But we did get an official localization and release of Mega Man and Base over here on the GBA. Now, playing this on GBA, it's not going to look as good as the Super Nintendo. There's going to be a little bit of screen crunch, but you're still getting the same great Mega Man game. Mega Man and Base is a game where you can play as Mega Man and or Base, Mega Man's rival, sort of, in the classic series. If you're a fan of classic Mega Man, there's a lot to love in this game. And I love the fact that this game can't be found on the modern Legacy Collection. So if you have the modern classic Mega Man Legacy Collections, Mega Man and Base is left out. So this is like a little nugget you can get for your GBA with some Mega Man goodness that you really can't find anywhere else, at least not here in the States. Plot, it's a Mega Man game. You're going to play a bunch of different levels and beat a bunch of Robot Masters, and that's the way it's going to work. You're going to get powers from those Robot Masters. If you've played a Mega Man game, you've played basically every Mega Man game. But that's not a bad thing, because classic Mega Man is a tried and true formula, and it's great to have an entry here on the Game Boy Advance. Mega Man and Base comes highly recommended. The next one you may have never thought to play. That is Turoc Evolution on the Game Boy Advance. Now, the console versions of Turoc Evolution wasn't great. That game was a follow-up to the N64 titles, and it was not as good as those earlier titles. But the GBA version of Turoc Evolution, I think, is the superior game. Now, this game is hard. This game is balls to the wall hard. And it's not an FPS. This game plays more like your classic run and gun game like Contra or Metal Slug. You're going to be running, and you're going to be gunning, getting different weapons, trying to escape the Lost Lands as Tal Set. There is a fun story and comic book style visuals between chapters and, before the game starts, which is nice because Turoc was originally a comic book character, so it's kind of neat to have that tied into this title. Like I said, this game is incredibly hard, very hard, but it is a ton of fun. So if you're into really tough as nails, run and gun shooters, Turoc Evolution on the GBA is surprisingly good. Now, if you're playing a Game Boy Advance, I'm going to guess that one of the series that you're most interested in playing is, of course, Pokemon. Pokemon has dominated Nintendo handhelds for a very long time, since its a release, and it's among the most popular games of all time. Now, the mainline Pokemon games for GBA, those aren't going to run you under $30, I'm sorry. But there is one game here that I think is worth your time and will run you under $30. That game is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team was the first in a series that started the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. It was released alongside the Blue Rescue Team game for DS, but the Red Rescue Team was for GBA, and it's the one that I have most experience with, so it's the one that I'm going to be talking about today. I'm sure the DS one is cool too and has some improvements, but I don't know much about that title or what you can do between them because I don't have Blue Rescue Team. But Red Rescue Team is an entry in the Mystery Dungeon series. Mystery Dungeon is a series that spans more than just Pokemon. They've done tons of other ones. I think of the Chocobo one I've played. I think of Shiren the Wanderer has some. There's a lot of different Mystery Dungeon titles out there. And Pokemon makes the most sense on the Game Boy Advance to have an entry because it's Pokemon. You actually play as the Pokemon in this game. You're going to be going into dungeons, fighting enemies, gathering items, and completing objectives. The story is pretty simple, but honestly, that's not why you're here. That's never why you're here for Pokemon to begin with, really. But that's not why you're here for this game. This game is all about the dungeon exploration, and I think that fits the GBA very well. Having this handheld is great, and it's a fun time. So if you're looking for something Pokemon related and maybe you don't want to play or you don't want to dish out the money for, the mainline Pokemon games, this game is still really good. The next one, kind of a cheat here, but there's a Duo cartridge out there that has two PS1 D-makes on it. And they're both Pac-Man related, which is pretty cool. The games included are Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness and Pac-Man World. Two games that I'm very, very nostalgic for. I don't know what to officially call this cartridge. I think like what I saw online was like two great games, Pac-Man World and Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness or something. But I'm sure if you just Google it, you could find this cartridge super easy. It goes for dirt cheap. And the conversions of these two games are pretty damn good. Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness was a maze Pac-Man game, you know, like the classics, but put into more of an adventure. You're going to be adventuring around different areas, but they're still set up like classic Pac-Man mazes, and you're going to be solving some puzzles, pushing some blocks, and trying to get through the levels. But it still has that classic Pac-Man feel. I really love the PS1 version of Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness, and this isn't quite a great replacement, I think, but it is a fun conversion. You know, a little something to play on the go on the GBA, and it is pretty good. The Pac-Man World conversion, though, here, I think is pretty good. Pac-Man World, of course, is the PS1. It's a 3D platformer, but honestly, the first Pac-Man World is more of a 2.5D platformer, if you ask me. It kind of plays like that. So, having a GBA version of that game, I think is incredibly smart, because you don't really need 3D to make it work, and it works really well here on the GBA. It definitely doesn't look as good, you know, as that version, but it still works, and it's kind of neat to play this now, especially because the last version of Pac-Man World I played was that repack version on the Xbox, you know, Series S. So playing the GBA remake again, it just looks kind of funny, but it is surprisingly playable and fun. So two great games in the Pac-Man series and on one cartridge. That'll keep you busy for a while, and if you love Pac-Man like I do, it's a great choice. The last game here comes from a certain purple dragon. That's right, it's Spyro Season of Ice. Now, Spyro had a lot of games on the GBA, and honestly, with the exception of like the crossover one with Crash, which is kind of shit, which I kind of like anyway because I played it as a kid, but it is kind of bad. The other Spyro games on GBA are pretty good, if not weird to go back to now. There was a point on GBA where companies tried to convert 3D platformers over into isometric games. I think of the Spyro games. I think of Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. I think that's what that's called. And which I had that as a kid as well. And the Rayman, I think like one of the Rayman games did it too. Try to convert 3D platformers into isometric top-down platformers, and I think they work, but I think they're a little odd to go back to because we don't use this type of gameplay much anymore for a lot of games. But Spyro Season of Ice is pretty good. A bunch of fairies have been trapped in some ice or something, and you have to go save them. It's a Spyro game. There's not much you need to know about the story. You're gonna run around. You're gonna collect gems. You're gonna complete objectives for characters and worlds, and you're going to find things in the levels. It's a collectathon game first and foremost. The game does look really good on the Game Boy Advance, surprisingly good. I went back to play this for the footage here, and I was blown away by how good this game actually looks on the Game Boy Advance. And it's a fun game. The only complaint I have is that the game could use a map. It is kind of easy to get lost in some of these worlds, so a map system might have been nice. But it's a fun game, and I could see myself putting a lot of time into this one. This is the only one in this episode that I haven't played much of as a kid or anything. I actually My experience with Season of Ice has been recent. I picked it up recently for the Game Boy Advance, but it's one that I do want to put more time into. I was very blown away by how they converted Spyro to a Game Boy Advance game. That was an episode. Thank you for watching. I love the Game Boy Advance. I'm happy to share these games with you. And thank you for watching and also voting. I put out a poll asking what video I should do next, and 5 Cheap Games got the vote. So thanks for choosing this. I enjoy doing this series. I hope to do more of it. And let me know what console or handheld or what platform series, whatever you want episode of 5 Cheap Games to cover, let me know in the comments below and I will consider it. I'm gonna go play some fucking Game Boy Advance. See you guys later.
you